Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this channel. My name is Hia Salma. I am a writer, speaker, somatic movement specialist, and today we're here with Wendy Morrell,
Hey,
who
hello,
is,
everybody.
yes, who is the president of a wonderful organization called the Sacred Dance Guild, and has a long history as a mover and choreographer and a thinker and a leader, an innovator. And it is such a special treat to have you here with us, Wendy, today, because the two of us, we go back a long time, and
We do.
we have had many conversations about dance and also the matters of the heart. And the matters of the heart is the focus of our episode today. So movement, heart, the heart taking care of the heart, heartbreak. We'll see how this unfolds. Wendy, thank you so much for being here. What do you want to tell us about yourself and your movement practices, maybe?
Okay, we can start there. And yes, as you said here, we've had many long conversations that meandered here, there, and everywhere as we kind of explore life together, which has been a treat. We met in New York City years ago. And I think our very first conversation in that little cafe was about matters of the heart. That's where we started.
Really?
I
How
think it was. It started with dance, but it moved pretty quickly, if I remember correctly, anyway. So it's been
interesting.
since
Okay.
the beginning. So yeah, so I am a sort of an accidental dancer, I call myself. I danced, my mother loved to move, and she always had me and my four sisters dancing around the house. It's what we did. But we grew up in a fairly, I didn't know I was poor until much later. When I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, we were poor, because I didn't realize that. We had such a blessed life, I think, that I didn't realize in other ways we didn't have money. So, but I didn't think that was important. And so dance for me came into my life in a more formal sense when I was older. In my early 20s, I started going to dance. I became a business analyst. So I always worked in business and running companies and all kinds of things. But I always started studying dance as just a thing that I love to do. It was my kind of other practice, if you will. So I took lots of dance classes in every form and type and style. And it was, I don't even know what year it was. I might have been 30 years old when this whole idea of dance and spirit came to me in a different way. And it was a friend. I went to a local church here in Ottawa, Canada, where I live, and a new minister had come in. And it's the United Church of Canada, which is a very liberal kind of Protestant organization who embraces all kinds of belief systems. And she came in, and I was working with the youth group at the time. And I remember getting a call from this wife of this new minister who said, Wendy, I'm just a question. It was around Easter was coming up. And she said, I have a sense you might be a dancer. I said, oh, yeah, I love to dance. Yeah, why? And she said, well, a friend wrote a poem about the hands of Christ. And this person knew that this other woman had danced in church. And she said, and I'm really not much of a solo dancer, but I said, danced in church. Like, what is that? And I really had never seen or even heard of that in my little world. It hadn't existed. So I'm like, wow, well, that sounds fascinating. And so we did this thing. We created this dance piece called The Hands of Christ to this poem that this gentleman had written. And that for me was a moment like, oh, it all makes sense. Because dance for me had always been how I got in touch with whatever that thing called God is. And I don't have a traditional belief system in that way, but I just knew that that's where your body connected with all of those other things. And so when it was then put into my sort of spiritual practice in a more formal way, I thought, oh, this makes so much sense. Why doesn't everybody do this? And that started me down a new path of studying. Oh my goodness, everybody has always done this. I just didn't know it. Me and many others. So then from then on, I just started exploring dance in every way. I still study dance, but it became really a spiritual practice, a practice of opening it for children, for adults, for teens, to allow dance to become not a performance piece, not steps that you do, but really an exploration of who you are personally and who you are in connection to others and the universe. So that's been the journey for quite a number of years.
And thank you for this introduction. And this is precisely why I wanted to have a conversation with you, because I feel like in discussing the matters of the heart, the spiritual connection, and to discover, explore the matters of the heart within like a sacred dance context, I think is a very interesting way to go about it. So when you dance, either by yourself or in a sacred dance setting or with a group, do you feel like you do it for your heart also? Like, how is your heart? Is your heart engaged? Do you explore the heart, to express the heart?
It's an interesting question, because I kind of think as the heart within ourselves as our connector to everything and everybody else, not just our internal connection that brings our sort of personal mind, body, soul, but I feel like when you really engage at the concept of the heart, then that's where kind of everybody's heart, and not even just people, everything that has energy to it. To me, that's the heart of it all. So that, I think, is the connection to this thing called the heart, and that goes across everything's relationships, personal relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, collective people you don't know. To me, it starts with that heart connection. And when you feel that, I think I don't know, there's just sense of knowing it's not just me, and it's not just my heart. My heart is now connecting with your heart and this person and that person. And so always the heart for me, without even thinking it through, has been the connector.
Tell us more about this. Like, you mentioned, for example, heart connection and feeling and tapping into the heart of it all. How does one do it? How does it, maybe there's an example that you can give us.
Interesting, because like for me, when I think about that, and maybe it's just, I thought everybody thought like that, like sometimes you don't know until you talk to someone and said, oh no, I don't feel like that. Well, you don't, like, I don't understand. So when I made that not made the discovery, when the discovery came to me that all of these parts were connected, to me, it was clearly the heart, not my head, not my brain, not even my body. The body was just the external representation of what was happening in your heart as your heart expanded, as it beat, as it continues with that, like the drumbeat of the heart is, to me, all beating. I look at other people, I think if there's 30 of us in a room, there's 30 hearts beating. Like, that's so cool. And the idea that I think we start to synchronize with our hearts, even our heartbeat starts to synchronize. So I think the heart, and I think science now has come out with this, it's not just a muscle or an organ, it has emotions, like we always thought they were located in the brain, the feelings and emotions. But I don't believe that. I think the heart equally, maybe even more, has the concept of feelings and emotions. So that's why the idea of connecting with the heart. So even, okay, I'll give you an example. When my husband died in 2015, and we had that kind of symbiotic relationship. And so I was heartbroken. I mean, I understood what heartbreak meant, it was like, oh my goodness, your heart really does break. It feels like that. And I created a movement practice every day just to get through the day, really. But I remember thinking that I always started with, and I would stand, and I did it in different rooms of my house and outdoors. I would do the same practice everywhere. It had words, but it also had movement, but always it started and ended with the heart. I always say, I connect with my heart, my broken heart. And I can kind of remember that, like, I can almost see what a broken heart looks like. And I remember that is that Leonard Cohen where it said that when the heart's cracked open, that's where the light gets in. And so the idea that if your heart is broken, you're honoring that broken heart. And so by moving, I talked about my body. Remember, I had this whole practice. My body is settled and content. My mind and my emotion is, my soul. And I did this whole, but it always started, I connect with my heart. And it always ended with, I connect with my heart and the hearts of all people. So I think even just stating it, sometimes it becomes real. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it becomes, it's outside of you. It's funny, the heart is inside, but I don't think of it as inside. I think of it as being this thing where the lights from the heart just go like energy, and that's where it comes from. Not your head, not your mind, but from your heart.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Now, in your response, I already hear multiple other questions. I'm like, okay, which direction do I go? Let me come back. While I think about the direction, I'll just tell you a narrative. I remember many years ago, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was a meeting, a sacred dance guild meeting in New York, and I attended it also. And we did a dance during that meeting where, now I forget the words exactly, very simple words that we repeated over and over with different partners. And in front of we were facing the partner, and we did some simple movement with words like, I look at you and I see, I connect to your soul, or something like this. And I remember how very moved I was by this experience. I had tears running down my eyes, because I really felt like there was this sincere connection between me and this person that I was facing, and then me and this other person that I was facing, through the repetitive movements and through the repetitive words. So I felt very connected to my heart and to my emotions also. Like right away, I started to feel something.
Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember the piece. I think it might have been a native piece we were doing, where my heart and your heart and my strength and your strength sort of runs through my mind. But I remember the situation for sure.
Yes. And to me, well, I'll talk about this later, maybe. So let's see. You started to, well, a few steps back. Let's remember the story that you told us about how you were dealing with the heartbreak after your husband died. But let's assume a different kind of listener or viewer of this video. I myself might be included in that group also. Like for some of us, it is really actually not so easy to respond to the instruction, listen to your heart, or open your heart, or follow your heart, or what does your heart want to say. Oftentimes when I ask myself these questions, I feel what my mind is telling me. I feel my thoughts, I hear my thoughts, I hear the mental realm very actively. But it is harder for me to come into the space of the heart, to find it. And then I use movement to get myself there. So I was wondering, what kind of advice, or what would you say to somebody like this, who comes to you and says, Wendy, I want to connect to my heart, but I can't really feel it so much.
It's in the way. I think that's really common. And I have, as I've worked in this field and worked with people, I see that a lot. And I used to work with children a lot, little children who would dance. And that was the message I would, because kids at this stage, what I noticed was they were always seeing themselves from an outside mirror. And I started noticing this much more as videos and pictures became more prevalent. And I would work with these little children in the space that I had, and I would see them almost trying to see themselves. So they were judging themselves from the time they were 3 and 4 years old, even below school. Whereas I think that used to happen around school. I started seeing it in little tiny children. I'm like, oh my goodness, these children aren't looking outside with their heart. They're looking at the outside, looking at them and judging them. And I remember thinking that. So I used to do a lot of work. Sometimes I work in the dark. I turn all the lights off and put glow in the dark stickers on them and say, now we can dance, and you can add stickers if you want to be more visible, but you don't have to. And we would go through this thing. And I'll never forget the first time I sat with them, and I thought, gosh, I need to get these kids in touch with their hearts, because they're all judging themselves. And I still remember this little group. Oh my goodness, it just makes me. And I said, everybody put your hand on your heart. I want you to feel it beating. Just take the time. We really took that space just to find it. If you don't feel it, find it. And look at all around the room, and all of us are feeling our hearts are all beating now like one big drum, when you see those drums. And I remember saying, when we dance today, and we were going to dance in a church service, we were sitting in this little kind of hallway on the way in. I said, when we dance today, we need to think about this. And the concept of God, we're not dancing for God. We're not dancing about God. We are letting God inside of our heart. We are recognizing it, and our heart is dancing. So that's really the only thing that matters. Where your feet and hands go, that could be quite interesting. But let's get in touch with our hearts. And I can still remember the difference in how those children danced that day.
Oh, yeah.
And so from then on, I did that always. It was a big part of our practice, was getting in touch with our heart at all times, and then dancing. And so
Wow.
I think sometimes it's just even knowing it, to say, I can't suspend my head just by telling my head to shut up. It doesn't respond well. But through movement sometimes, and through even just the thought that my heart is beating along with all the hearts on this planet right now. The slow hearts, the fast hearts, the heart that I walk by people on the street, and just sense that we are the pulse of the planet. And I think that helps, just thinking, because I think what happens, what you said earlier, we protect our hearts. We want to, because when they get broken, it hurts. But for me, I started thinking that hearts are like, Japanese kintsugi, the practice where the Japanese take beautiful pottery when it's broken and they don't throw it out.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't glue it so you can't see it. They glue it with gold on it, so you see. And I think of a broken heart like that. When we're putting it back together, we don't want to get rid of what broke it, because that is the beauty of life. It's the beauty of relationship. And so if we put it back together with a gold thread, and we see it reconnected, and it's more beautiful than it was, then our heartbreak becomes precious. It's not something to avoid. It's something to say, oh my goodness, imagine how beautiful my heart will be with all those golden lines as it repairs itself, So it's kind of just shifting how we visualize even a heartbreak, or what it feels like to open our hearts, to allow that kind of vulnerability with another person, other people we know, people we don't know, not easy, for sure. And I think it's a practice, like living is a practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The more we try it, the more we test it and say, what would it feel like if I just allowed my heartbreak to be visible? What does that feel like? And I think what I certainly have experiences was, the more I not enjoy, the more I embrace the heartbreak, the more beautiful it becomes. And it's still painful and it's still sad, but it then has this precious beauty, I think. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to put that into words, because it really is a wordless kind of experience.
I love all of these thoughts and images. As I was listening to you, I was thinking, oh, wait a second. It has never occurred to me to walk on the streets and imagine
Mhm.
like, the people who pass me by, that they are these like hearts, instead of seeing
Yeah,
these people I
yeah.
connect to, or I see their hearts first, or
Wouldn't that? Yeah, that's. I mean, I think that's what it's about, though.
and then I love the image of a golden thread also,
Yeah,
and viewing my heartbreak as something that is precious. But now, Wendy, coming back
mm,
to movement also, because I think in the
yep,
discussion of the matters of the heart and how to deal with heartbreak, I think as we live our lives, we need help from this
yeah,
type of therapy and this type of healing arts and this type of, I don't know, writing or
yeah,
psychological
totally.
support. And so there's no one way to heal the
No,
heart, let's say. And the
no,
piece that I'm interested in, since this is a channel about movement and the sensual body, I'm interested in the piece that dance and movement can give us as we explore the heart. Like, how can I understand my heart better through movement? How can I
yeah,
heal my
yeah,
heart through movement? So maybe we turn to this question. So let's say, like in my life, for example, I have this, I don't know whether to open my heart or whether to protect my heart. So
mm.
because both are important also, and to distinguish when to do what. So do you think, in your experience also, maybe whether through movement I can understand my heart better, like I can understand through dance the voice of my heart better, what it wants to tell me, actually, like how to behave in front of, let's say, a certain
Yeah,
person.
for me, for sure. And like you say, I think everybody has their own methods and ways, but movement is a pretty, fundamental part of our life. I think many people have protected themselves through that too. Whereas, as children, I don't know any kids who at under 2 don't just move naturally. They do. As they get older, as people judge them, as they feel judged through their body, because it's so visual and visible, some of them begin to hide their movement. And so I think it takes a long, as if you have done that over a long period of time. So for some people, that's very frightening to move because it's too visible, it's too open, it's too scary. So I get that. But I do think the more you do it, the safer everything becomes, the more you allow that vulnerability. So example, my husband ended up dying very early on a Wednesday morning. On Monday night, so a day and a half, I knew he was dying, and he was dying beautifully. He was gracefully. I hope I have that level of grace in me when my time comes. I was organizing a group, which I do annually, to dance on the Ottawa River, a series of moving meditations. And it was happening that Monday night. And so I remember someone had called me on Monday and said, "Oh, Wendy, we'll still be there. We'll make it happen." I'm like, "Oh no, I'll be there." And they were like, "What do you mean? You're with John at the hospice?" I said, "Oh no, but I'm coming to that. I need to be there." I said, "It will be an hour and a half. I need that hour and a half." He's still here. That doesn't change. We're still together. It doesn't matter whether I'm, a mile away there. I need to do that movement with all of you. I need to be at the river. I need to open my heart, because this is a time where you do feel yourself going into that fear. I said, I need to keep it open. So as this happens, it's as open as it can be, not as closed as it can be.
Mhm.
And so I went and we did this moving mandala. Now, these were good friends of mine. Everybody knew. Most of them knew my husband very well. He was the photographer. So it was sad because everybody was saying goodbye at that time. We knew it would be within a few days, but there was something so heartbreakingly open. Everybody's heart was cracked open together in movement. And we did this series of the Mandela movements, which I know you've done before. It's 8 movements that are done in a pattern. And I can tell you that absolutely, I could feel the energy of everything, every person, and John's energy, and just, it came together. So for me, that was an important moment. And when I think about his death, that is wrapped up in that movement, the wonderful movement that we did on the river. So if not that, I might have gotten, more inward and more close to myself. And in that little room with just us, I could have kind of retreated. And I think it's the time to do the opposite from retreating. It's the time to open your heart and let it be visible in and during the heartbreak. But so for me, for sure, movement is, and it was after he died, a friend called me and said, "Would you come and do that movement piece? We're opening a peace labyrinth with 200 people. She said, "Most people I wouldn't call and ask if their husband had just died, but for you, I think I'm asking." And I said, "For sure, that would be so perfect to share this with 200 people in the public as we opened a peace labyrinth." For me, that was like, what a gift, because it did force me. I mean, it's easy to crawl under the rug and just be heartbroken all by yourself, and your loneliness and the sad can be invasive. But I think if you take that out and honestly and openly and authentically say, "I have a broken heart, but here I am." And I don't know how many other people there have broken hearts or have had broken hearts. So in a way, the healthy hearts are healing the broken hearts, and we're all together sharing. So I think there's something quite phenomenal. And I think that's why older societies, ancient societies, what were funerals? They were dancing. They were moving together in patterns, in heartbreak together. I think that's like what we need. Not sit like this and little, like that's not even natural. But our society has done that.
I remember my own stories of heartbreak and loss, and then how I feel immediately after. And I've also been in these days where I feel like I'm walking about in the world like an injured animal who's bleeding, and everybody can see that this animal is bleeding. And during these moments, I've really felt something magical. Like people somehow they come, they gather, they notice, they uphold, they take care, but it's because I'm not there at like please help me, please help
No,
me.
no, no.
If they see that there's this person who now is having the moment of great bleeding.
Yeah, I think that
Yes.
is what it's about. That's the human condition. And I think our heart is that thing that is the connector, that we are one, that we say that, but what does it mean to people? But when I think of it, all these hearts beating, I think that's what it is. It's really, they're all individual, but they're all beating together. It is the earth, the bad, the good, the, all of it. And the more we can harmonize our hearts with openness and love, that the less we will have the hate and because I think that happens when people put their little borders up, and I'm going to get back at you for doing this to me, and it becomes this punitive kind of, and I think it's when they close their hearts. I think with an open heart you can't do that. It's almost impossible. It's impossible to hate anything.
Yes, we have talked about this, the two of us privately, also about this this notion of armor and protection around the heart. And I sometimes, when I look at my acquaintances who are going through heartbreaks and how they respond,
Yeah,
intuitively, I want them to move. I want them to dance. I want them to come to the body and to movement, because intuitively it also makes sense to me that if something is protected and guarded at frozen, it's like there's no movement. There's something like energy maybe can't move. And so I'm like, oh, if the people, I'm not saying come to my dance class and then your heart will be healed, but I feel like just like moving, being in movement, being in touch with the body somehow will melt this
absolutely.
or the protective something that kind of
100%. I absolutely, and I think personal movement is important. Like I said, when after John died, I had this thing, and I would do it in all the rooms of my house. I never did it in the same place. I would move because I kept thinking, if I stay in one place, I will petrify. It's so difficult. It's so lonely. It's so heartbreaking. I will petrify. And that isn't what I want to do. And it certainly wouldn't be what John would want me to do. And so I consciously moved even in different spaces in my house and looked out different windows in order to connect. Now, that was a lonely thing in a way. It made me feel better in my heart because I used very positive effort. I am smiling with gratitude for the amazing gifts that have been gifted to me in my life, those kind of wonderful affirmations that also have mudras. But I think even more than that, moving in community, and particularly even when it's sequence movement, free movement is lovely. I love to do that. But there is something to me about some of those, like you say, that little circle dance where you're putting your hand on the heart. The moving mandalas were all doing those same 8 movements with the same thing. There is something in that, something ancient, something calling that brings us. And I really believe if you tested people's energy and their heartbeats, they would start beating together.
yes.
Within. I'm sure they've done that kind of research. I'm sure it would exist.
Yes,
And so there's something really important to me about that group, collective, sequence, similar movement. Like there's something about that calls you into community, and that's healing. You feel better. It's not complicated. You just feel better. You may feel sad. You may be crying all together, but you're crying together.
Yes. And I not to make this about genders, but I feel like maybe women are more likely to find these communities. But especially when I look at my male colleagues and friends, I wish they would come to movement, to body during these times also.
You know what? It's so funny you say that, because I was just chatting to Trisha and a few of the others about getting a group of men to do a sacred Sunday, because I said, I think, and I'm going to say particularly middle-aged men who have brought up in a certain conditioning, may happen less now than it was at one point. They need it more than anybody, because they have really compartmentalized. The women do it more naturally. And I don't think it's that they wouldn't or don't want to. They don't know how to do it. They're so conditioned. And so looking at ways that we can invite men into that community, to just be able to be vulnerable is a complicated thing. And I think it's very difficult. way more difficult for them than it is for most women. Not that some women don't have a great deal of difficulty with it, but I think it, like you say, it's much harder. So we're trying to think of how can we open that door just to even have the conversation as a dialogue with the voice and only adding movement in small little ways just to see what it feels like in some kind of a safe environment. I think but if you look at cultures who do dance like that, I was in Africa this summer. Oh my goodness, it's different. They don't have that issue at all. So I looked at that community and I thought, wow, it's an interesting thing how it's so natural. So I think it would be nice for us to bring that back to our culture because we all had it. We all started with it in our historical cultures, our ancient cultures.
I love what you said also about like pattern movements and that like circle dances, sacred dances, ritualistic dances where we don't necessarily need to. Yes, as you said, also it's nice to have expressive improvisational dances. Somatic movement is a lot about that. Improvise, but to have something that is stable, that stays, can be so powerful too. Like I don't know what it is actually.
I think it's necessary. To me, it's necessary. It's the ritual, and our bodies yearn and hunger for the ritual. And I think we've lost a lot of that in our culture in particular. Many cultures haven't lost it. The Native Canadians here, the Native North Americans, their ritual and their movement is huge. And they go for very long periods of time, recognizing that it takes time for your body to enter into the fullness of the authenticity of that ritual movement that everybody is doing together. They will go on for hours. I don't even know how their bodies are still standing. But I think there is something necessary in that for the human condition.
Right. And I think there's really something, yes. So we must note that as something we all need to practice a lot, find ways to do that. But it can be also something very simple. For example, I have let's say I don't have access to communities where something like this is practiced, or I have to look for them. Like, for example, I have a DVD of a Kundalini yoga practice, and there is, for example, a movement that we keep repeating for 6, 7, 8 minutes. It's a simple movement done with the chanting mantra, and it just opens my heart. Just that one repetitive movement is so beautiful. So we never know, like something simpler can work also. I wanted to
absolutely, it can be very simple. And in fact, most ritual movements are quite simple. If you look at those circle dances and some of the body prayers that are ritual, they're quite simple movements. They're not complicated. There's not a lot of memory or steps. As you move into a meditation through a repeated movement that's very similar and has a repetition. So
through repeating something, we kind of calm down and other states take over. I think the piece of music is also very important here. Through music, we get in touch with emotions also. And then our hearts might start to express themselves.
Music can bring you places for sure. And I mean, that has positives and negatives.
Yes.
Because known music will take you to a place that which may not be the intention of the person who's offering it. So each person, now that's just what happens, and it's okay. It's not a bad thing. It just may not be what your intention is. So sometimes when you're using music, I think you need to be consciously aware, especially with groups, of what it might trigger. And so trying to kind of understand that at the same time as you're using music in the way that it needs to be used, which is, just the sounds, just certain sounds, even without words, bring you to a certain place,
Wendy, what do you think? Healing the heart. Do you feel like it's a matter of I let time pass. It's a natural cycle. I will live my life, and at a certain point my heart will feel healed? Or do you feel, no, there's also some work that we can do to heal the heart? Like, let's do something about it.
I think it's both of those things. I think some people, in a way, almost make it too precious, their broken heart. It becomes their definer. I'm brokenhearted, and they'll live in it. It's like, maybe put a tent, don't build a house, like it's kind of because you can still have your broken heart. My heart will never, ever, it's healed, if you call it healed, but it has that gold heel through it. It still was cracked. I'm never going to change, and I don't want to change the crack. I love that crack. It's a beautiful crack. But I think I want to appreciate it with gratitude. I want to have it precious, but not so precious that I can't go on and open it to be broken again. I'm not just going to keep that one heartbreak just for me. So, but I think there are people who almost, start to live that heartbreak. And I think that's sad, because I think then they're missing out for the opportunity to get broken again. And it's okay. This is okay. That is the risk we take when we love big. Our heart breaks big,
I
right?
remember, oh my God, I remember that time. One of the times, dear listeners, that I went to Wendy again, like, Wendy, what do I do about what do I do in this situation? And I remember you said, and so you get your heart broken, and so what? Like,
That's great.
What's the big deal? Like,
I would think about this. How would it be to go through a whole life and never have had your heart broken? What would that look like? I'm 96 years old, and my heart's just been the same all the time. Like, what would that mean? I don't even know. What kind of a life would I have lived? Like, it's not that we're running out trying to get our heart broken every minute, but that's the risk of living our life. And a broken heart is not the end of anything. It's a place on the road, and for me, I think it's important. It keeps you back in touch with humanity, back in touch with all the things that can happen, the good, the bad, the ugly, and being able to just say, this is life. This is life, and embracing that. And again, we talked, if we go back to that movement, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not right, but people who move authentically may be more likely to risk broken hearts. Maybe more likely, because they have experienced what it feels like. Even if their heart's not broken, they have experienced what it's like to open their heart to other people, to have that moment of vulnerability. And so if you've had that, then I think you're more likely to think this is not a bad thing. Whereas people who have protected it and hidden, and I think they get angry. I think they get mad. I don't even think they would know why, but they're so protected. They're so hardened. It's the softening of the heart. We talk about a hard heart. You think about that. People who have hard hearts, how would we think they look like? You don't see them happy, and you don't even visualize, oh, that's a hard-hearted person. You wouldn't visualize them laughing and smiling. So I think that's true, because they get just sort of inward to themselves, and I can't even imagine it. To me, that's a very sad thing. So you almost want to reach in and grab it. You don't want to shatter it. That's different.
So now how do we become better holders of other people's hearts, or creating a safe space for somebody else's heart?
That's a good question. I think I don't even think you have to do anything. You just have to be aware. We avoid it sometimes. So it's like when someone dies, people avoid them, and they avoid them not because they want to, but because they don't know what to say.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know what to say. I'm like, well, don't say anything then. Just be. Just hold your hand out. Just be in a compassionate moment. But I think we as a society, again, we're back to the expectations that we've put on ourselves to be able to, well, don't worry, you'll be over that soon. It's like, what does that mean? And I always remember people say, oh, I was so it's here that John passed on. I'm like, oh no, he didn't pass on, he died. But I hated that term, pass on. What is that? Like, what are we trying to, it's just something about it really kind of, I didn't hate it, but it bothered me. I said, no, he died. And I'm okay with that word, I'm okay with that action. I'm okay with what happened. I don't want to lighten it. I don't want to make it into something it isn't. I want to embrace that fact. And so it's just that same kind of thing. So I think being with people is allowing it and not being afraid, to listen to whatever they have to say. I always, and I do this, and I don't know, maybe some people don't like it, but I always talk about the person. It doesn't matter how long it's been. If I have a thought, I will say that, My sister's son died at 26 years old. And I'll often find a little picture or something, and I'll send it to her right away and say, oh my God, look at Nick in this one. Have you ever seen this picture? And some people say, oh, doesn't that make her sad? It's like, yes, but it acknowledges his amazing life and her place in that life. And so the sadness, I think, you don't want to forget him. Like, what would that look like? So I think we need to just embrace all of those things. And in community, it makes it, I don't know if easier is the right word. It makes it just doable. It's not, you can be alone, but not lonely,
Yes. And in my experience with with heartbreak and loss, I feel like, well, I remember, for example, I had a client who said, yeah, I can't come to your classes, your dance classes, because when I look at the videos of this class, this type of class, I feel like everybody's very joyous in that class, and I'm not in that same mindset. And so, okay, maybe sometimes the setting, the dance setting is not appropriate for the feelings that this person, like, maybe there needs to be a special kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Not with everybody who isn't. But I was thinking, what really has helped me during those times of heartbreak is like being with my body. Maybe I don't feel like dancing, but somehow connecting to my physical self. Either I give myself a massage, or I lie on the ground and I put my hands on the chest, or I do something where I feel like my body, I'm connected to my body. And even that helps, I think, with the heartbreak.
I do. I think all of those things, it's that whole mind, body, soul connection, because people can feel disassociated from themselves. When they get very heartbroken or sorrowful, they almost feel out of body. Like it's their body walking around. They're not really with it. I remember I used to say to people after John first died, I said, what does it feel like? I said, two things come to mind. Some days I get up and I put my body on. That's what I feel like. I get up and I put my body on and I start doing things that I need my body to do. I have to go to the grocery store. I need to take my body with me. And so I would consciously think, I'm just putting my body on. I don't want to, but I'm going to do that. And I'll put, like you just said, I put my body on, and then my body compels me. And the other thing I would say is it's like going from living a very colorful existence to being black and white. And knowing I'm black and white right now, and then every now and then a little piece of color would pop out because you would think about something or see something or even cry, and that would be color. And so it's like you're reconnecting to the color, but you do that through the things that you do. If I probably stayed in my bed under the pillow, I might still be just trying to put my body on to go to the bathroom. So I think just those are the elements that help us through heartbreak personally, and then connecting to other people. And I 100% think just do, even like you say, sad movement. I was in Africa this summer, and I went to a graveyard, and this old woman, 86 years old, it's a family graveyard on a farm. And her name was Grandma Jennifer, everybody called her. So I went, and she took me hand by my hand and led me through it's in the middle of this old farm. They've broken down barricades to get in. It's a family gravesite. And she walked me through the gravesite and introduced me to each person. Her grandfather, her mother, the little baby, a nephew that died, the this and that. So as we walked through that, maybe there was 25 graves, I'm not about that many. It was just the most interesting walk with this woman. And you could see her. If she had done it herself, that would have been one thing. But having me with her to tell about each person gave her heart a place to put it. And then when we finished sat, her nephew was there, two other family members of the family. And I said, oh my goodness, I don't know if you know the circle dance, Ancestor Sky People. It's a beautiful piece, very simple, and it's a ritual movement over and over again. And I said, would you mind? I really feel like I have to dance this piece. And I happened to have my phone, and the music was on my phone. So in this old graveyard, in the middle of this farm, a field, I don't even know how we got there, with this family, and they started just doing the movement with me in the middle of all the ancestors. So it was sad. Everybody was crying because her sister had died a few months before, and that's why we were there. So it was very sad, but it was a beautiful moment of heartbreak in community. And I will say everybody felt better after that, even though it was really sad.
Mm.
So there's, it was a really precious moment. I just, I'll never forget what it felt like watching this. And the older sisters were also, these are, older ladies, and they were doing this movement with me. It was just really quite with their ancestors all around. It was amazing.
Oh, that's powerful.
It was pretty, yeah, it really was. So that's a heart moment. That's a heartbreaking moment. It's a sad movement. But the sadder it became, almost like you could feel the heart healing in that sadness. You recognized the broken heart. You accepted the broken heart and felt that together our hearts were kind of connecting, and that was healing the heart.
Can I ask you something about what you mentioned very, very early on during the interview? You said you were working with the kids, and then after you had done the healing, the connecting to the heart, you felt like the kids danced very differently. How was it different to them?
That's interesting, because before that, they were dancing for everybody who was witnessing them.
Hmm.
They were seeing themselves through the eyes of the people looking at them. Oh, I did it wrong, or I look good, or, they were just witnessing themselves almost from the outside, looking at themselves and judging, either well, good or bad. And when we did that exercise with the heart, I just felt it just totally shifted. Each one of them were just dancing with their heart, and whatever the concept of God they have, these little guys, they had. So was technically their dance was probably not as good. maybe it wasn't as we had created it. But even the congregation, I still remember that day. I had people in the congregation say, "Oh my God, those kids today, they were just shining. They were shining." And so I think it's that whole thing, when you get in touch with your heart and you're not worried who's looking at me or what they're looking at, and you're dancing with not just by themselves, but with all the other little hearts, it was really a special moment. So that was very early when I started working with those kids. So that became just the practice. And if you talk to those kids today, and many of them are PhDs and this and that and other things, I am sure they would all say, I remember our heart dances, And so I feel really happy to have gifted them that experience, to be just a little kid with a beautiful heart, And that's when we would say that God doesn't care about any other part of my body, only what my heart is doing. If everybody's going left and I go right, that's okay, because my heart is there. Just some were very funny like that. My heart was perfect. I'm like, yes, it was. It was funny.
Do you have any final comments, or maybe some pieces of advice to the listeners as to how they can have more heartful connection through dance or the body, or any advice that you have, or something that you
I think all the things we've said, I think, first of all, recognize and really visualize an open heart. The heart cracked open. I love that. That's a phrase I use a lot. We are here with our hearts cracked open. And if we think that way, sometimes it's easier, even just to say it. Create mantras and mudras of your own, in your own space, wherever it's comfortable for you. And, even if it's one simple sentence that you say over and over again, something that you need. I smile with gratitude, and have a movement, and just do that. I have done it out in the street sometimes. Walk down the street and say, what would happen if I just started doing my little thing? I mean, some of my, but take a chance. It's a risk, but you don't know who might smile. And share, be open and share. And really, as we both said, if you can find places to dance in community, find practices, whether it's even online, like, to me, the last few years have been amazing, the number of things we've been able to do online. If we can't get out in person, I mean, in person is lovely, but you can do a group online and it feels amazing to have all the little squares and all the little boxes doing something together. It can be as simple as just reaching out with your hands. And
Yeah.
so find ways, and then be aware of what's happening, you know? I don't know. I think it's just awareness is the big part of it, number one, and then practice, you know?
I love all
And
of
broken hearts, and just picture the gold threads. Go if you don't know Japanese kintsugi, go Google that and find some beautiful pieces of pottery and think of them as your hearts. Every broken heart is these beautiful repairs. When they're being fixed, it's with golden threads. To me, that's an image I absolutely love.
I love this too. That's a beautiful note on which to sum up our conversation. Or do you have something else to add? Anything
I don't
else?
think so. Just everybody, I'm glad we all are together with our broken hearts and our healed hearts and even our hard hearts. So if you meet someone with a hard heart, just think about it and let your open heart just go out. Sometimes it just might get them. It's okay.
That's beautiful. I'm going to put in the description that goes with this video a link also to Sacred Dance Guild.
Please
So
and thank you.
you can find out more about this your beautiful organization and the events that you do, and dance and online and in person in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And
I think really, and that concept of dance, I'm working with a group right now here in Ottawa, and dance is frightening to a lot of people. Just the word dance is frightening because we have a connotation of what it means. And I would say, go back to your roots. Go to every one of us has it in our background and history somewhere, where dance wasn't for trained dancers. We're all dancers. Dance however you dance. It's okay. It's lovely. I love going to the art center and seeing beautifully trained dancers do beautiful work. But I equally love walking down the road and seeing a bunch of kids on the corner, or my little kids at church, and whether they've had any training or not, watching people dance. In this summer in Zambia, watching the kids dance every day. Oh my goodness, they were just in the moment, in the spirit of the moment, and allowing their mind and body and soul just to be in that moment. That's a joyful thing. Do it.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. My name is Hias Alma, and our guest was Wendy Morrell. And then we will see you in our next episode.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.